Hello again, it's Uncle Jeff with another installment in the adventures of psychic experiences. This could be titled, I Find My Guru. So in 1989, I'd been thinking about reading about an Indian teacher, and one morning in about November, I woke up from what's called a lucid dream. This is a dream that is that sticks out so much in your mind that you don't forget it. Normal dreams, you get up, by the time you've brushed your teeth and gone to the bathroom, you've forgotten them. This one just kept getting stronger and stronger in my mind as the day went on. And it was a very short dream. I was floating over this quadrangle of two-story white buildings with deep verandas, and it looked like it was in India. It was in a rectangle, and there were posts and deep verandas, and there was a crossroads going across the courtyard. And at the center of the crossroads was a little man dressed in an Indian outfit, sitting in the lotus position, meditating. And I'm floating up above him and kind of come down, and he starts speaking to me in a language I don't understand. It sounds like Hindi. And I listened for a while, and then my only comment was, well, can you speak English to me? I know all you Indian people learn English, which of course was kind of a rude comment to an Indian because the British were the occupiers. But he just looked like a little squinty-eyed guy with kind of a smile like that, and he just kept on meditating and speaking to me in Hindi. That was the end of the dream. And so as I'm getting ready for work, I'm thinking, well, that was a strange dream, and I won't, because I don't know what that means, but it did sort of correlate with I wanted to learn about an Indian guru. By about mid-morning at the office, between patients, this thing kept coming back to me, and I thought, well, that's funny, why haven't I forgotten about it yet? And slowly the meaning of what he was saying was being translated to me, or I was getting the message. And by noon, I knew that I had to go to Scottsdale and buy a book. But I didn't know where. I knew about a New Age bookstore in Scottsdale, but that didn't seem like that was it. By the end of the day, about 5:15, it was just, driving me batty. I had to get in my car and drive to Scottsdale, and somehow I would find where I was supposed to go. So I drove out Shea Boulevard all the way to 70th Street, where this other bookstore was. And as I approached it in my mind, it said, no, go to Scottsdale Boulevard, which was 72nd Street, and make a left. And so I drive up a few blocks, and then Schumann Lane came into my mind, and I sort of knew where Schumann Lane was from a map, but I'd never been there. And in Scottsdale, between two major streets, they often make a little shopping district where they have two streets come in from the edge, and then there's sort of a rounded square, and the buildings are all around it, and there's only two ways to get in and out. And indeed, there was Schumann Lane in front of me to the right. So I turned in, I drove around the square, and looked at all the different stores, and there was a vacuum cleaner store, and it was all kinds of stuff, but in the far corner was what looked like a New Age bookstore. By this time it was about 5:45, and it said on the door they closed at 6. I walked in, and there was nobody in the store. The lady said, well, I'm about to close, and I said, oh, I won't take very long. I'm just looking for a book written by an Indian. And she said, oh, just go up there in the back in that raised area, that's where they all are. So I walked back there, and it was up a couple steps on a platform, and I noticed that the bookshelves were all painted white. There were 2 layers of them. They were about 3 feet high. They were in a rectangle. And as I'm standing in the center, I realized that those Indian buildings in the dream were a larger representation of this area where these books were. And on top of the shelf, there were little cards like you'd have as place cards at a dinner, and there were names like Ram Krishna, Ram Das, Vivekananda, some other ones I don't remember. So I'm standing in the middle looking at the long wall, the short walls are on the side, and all of a sudden in my peripheral vision comes this face like this. And when I look at it, it quick disappears and goes back. I look over there and that's weird. So I'm looking ahead, and pretty soon it comes back out, and it's looking alongside my head. So this time I just sort of look at it without moving my head. And I can see there's an Indian man's face there, and it goes back as soon as I look at it. So I turn around and look at the lady to see if she has a hologram projector or something, if she's, doing something funny for me, and she's just got her head down. She's counting out her till for the end of the day. Well, then the third time it came out and went back, I went over and pulled the book out that it was coming out of, and it was the paperback version of the hardcover, which I have here, but that's the face that was coming out of the book. And I looked at the man and I said, well, this looks sort of like an Indian version of Jesus, so maybe that'd be an interesting person to read about. So I picked up the book, and like I typically do, I started looking from the back to the front. Must be a habit from an old life as an Arab or a Jew, since they read right to left. Looked at the table of contents, and in the back of the book was this testimonial from a funeral home at Forest Lawn, actually, the Forest Lawn Funeral Home here. And it was a testimony of what happened when this man passed away. They had taken his body, embalmed it, and prepared it, but devotees from India were going to come, so they had to preserve it for about 25 days, waiting for them to come, and then they actually never showed up. But the morticians noticed, to their surprise, that the body never started drying out, no mold grew on it, that even though a body's embalmed, they have to refresh the body, because the air dries it out, and the beard kind of grows out. People say the beard grows. It's actually the skin shrinking around the hairs that are there. But none of that happened, and no odor ever emanated from the body. They didn't have to redo the embalming. They didn't have to do a thing. It just remained as fresh as the day he passed away, some 3 weeks later, when they finally put him in his crypt. So that got my interest right away, because I thought, well, that's an immutable body, and I knew that St. Thomas Aquinas and I think Bernadette of Lourdes and a couple saints' bodies their coffins had been opened up centuries later, and there they were lying, just as fresh as the day they'd been put there. So I bought the book, took it home, laid it on the coffee table, didn't start reading it till a couple months later. And actually, when I got to the middle of the book, that's where all the pictures were. And I didn't realize, because I hadn't done this before, but when I got to the middle of the book, I came across this picture. And this was the man in the dream, a little squinty-eyed guy that was speaking Hindi to me. And his name is Lahiri Mahashai. He is the guru of Yogananda's guru, or the Param Guru. So I became a devotee of Paramahamsa Yogananda. There was a temple in Phoenix from SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship, and I started doing meditation there and going to the services where we did chanting, and there was no dogma. I liked it because churches usually had a bunch of stuff you had to believe without questioning, and the only thing they did was they would read a Bible verse, and then they would read a corresponding verse out of the Bhagavad Gita and show how the two holy books taught the same thing. So shortly after that, I wanted to go visit one of their other temples, and there was one in Encinitas, California, with beautiful grounds. And this is just north of San Diego. So while we were out there visiting Rob and Jack, I mean, maybe I was there for a medical conference, I drove up to Encinitas and went through the grounds, and just a block away was the local temple, and it was in an old church, actually. There was a bookstore right inside the front door, and there was a lady in there, and I went in about noon or 1 o'clock and asked her, I said, is it okay to go meditate in the temple? Oh, sure. She said, we're open till 6. So I walked in, and there were a couple people sitting there meditating, so I found a spot off to the side and pulled my one leg up and crossed it. I'm not flexible enough to get into the full lotus position, but I can do a half lotus, and so got myself seated there and started meditating, and realized I was going into, this was having a nice meditation. It was very deep, and I was in that black void, and somewhere in the middle of it, some sparkly lights showed up, and in the black void, this point came out, and it started burning a sort of a fluorescent green design that had 3 parts to it, like this. up. And then in the center there was a circle with a star in it. And when it was all done being formed, I'm looking at it and it's doing this sparkly light thing, just like what I saw when my father died. And I'm looking at it and thinking, well, it's interesting. What is that? It kind of looks like a banana or something. And then it slowly started turning like this. And it went faster and faster and faster until it was just a glowing ball of light. And then all of a sudden, it did what I call a computer dissolve. All the little lights just spread out, covered my whole vision, and disappeared. And then I kept meditating, and it seemed like a few minutes later I opened my eyes and I thought, well, that was interesting. I saw something in meditation. I had seen colors before and some shapes, sort of amorphous shapes, but I'd never seen anything so specific and with that same sort of astral light that I saw with my father's soul. So I thought, well, I'm probably have been doing this for 45 to 60 minutes. I think I really did a nice long meditation, because at that point I was maybe lucky to get in 20 minutes. And I looked at my watch and I'd been there for 3 hours. So I thought, fortunately they didn't lock me in. They hadn't closed yet. So I got up and I walked out, and the lady in the bookstore said, oh, you had a nice long meditation. And I said, yes. And I saw some interesting things. She said, yeah, that happens to some people. And as I'm exiting, I look up at the door, and the symbol of the Self-Realization Fellowship is above the door, and it's on the spine of the book here. And if you look at that and turn it this way, that is the design I saw. It was being handed, as if it was being handed down to me. It was the Self-Realization Lotus with the star in the middle, which represents you being one with the universe or the spiritual I. And as I walked out the door, I thought, oh, I guess that's the path I'm supposed to follow. So I did. I signed up for the lessons. I became a Kriya Bond, learned Kriya Yoga. I was initiated in Phoenix. I went to LA to the main Mother Center and was initiated there too, and practiced that for many years while we still lived at our first house in Phoenix, where I made a special meditation room. The next incident was maybe the next year. I think it was around 1991. Randy liked to go to the gay bars and have some drinks, and then he would try to sneak home down smaller streets, because he maybe had too many. Well, the cops would set up a turkey shoot there where they knew the gay guys were coming home from Apollo's bar, and test everyone for alcohol. Well, he'd gotten a DUI there in 1987, and not much had happened back then. A little fine, and I don't even think he got his license suspended, but we had to pay more for car insurance. Well, this was 1991. It was 4 years and 9 months after the last one. Had it been 5 years, it would have been considered a new first-time DUI and not so severe. But he got stopped at that same spot. He got a second DUI. He ended up getting sentenced to 2 months in jail with work release during the day. It was if you served half, they usually reduced it. And lost his license, I think, for a year. And our car insurance went way up. I had to separate him onto a separate policy, and it was really irked me, because I'd been telling him all along, you didn't learn your lesson from that first one. You're going to get another one, and I'll be careful. I said, well, why don't you just not go to the bar and have more than one cocktail, or have more than one cocktail? Well, he just liked bar socialization. I think that was, and it's something his family did, and it was comfortable to him. And I didn't go along with him because I didn't care to do that. So I don't think I would have made much difference anyway. So when he called me from the police station, oh, would you come and get me? I got arrested. And what for? Well, I got another DUI, driving under the influence. And I almost lost it right there. I said, okay, I'll be there. And the police station was just a short ways from our house. But I got so angry, I can honestly say this is probably the only time in my life where I really lost control. And I was all by myself at home. And I started screaming out loud about drinking and how could he do this, and that was so stupid. And I went and gathered all the liquor bottles up in the house, whether they were unopened or partial, opened them all up, and I dumped all the liquor down the kitchen sink. We were on a septic system, and so the smell of the alcohol came up through the toilets, and all the sinks. The house smelled like a brewery. But I made quite a dramatic scene there just by myself, and then I got it out of my system. So when I went and picked him up, I was calmer, and I could say, well, I dumped out all the alcohol because you're not going to drink anymore, and you're going to go to AA. Yeah, I'll go to AA. And so he got sober from that point on and didn't drink anymore. 2 days later, I get a phone call from New York City, my old roommate Jim Cohen, the one who lived with me between Joe and Randy back in St. Paul, and the one who'd introduced me to Edith Piaf, the French singer. I hadn't heard from Jim in years. We exchanged, I maybe sent him my Christmas letter. He was Jewish, he didn't send out Christmas cards, but he called me up, and by this time he'd lived in New York long enough so he'd picked up a New York accent, even though he grew up in the Twin Cities. He goes, "Jeff, how are you? How are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm fine, Jim." And said, "Well, I just got the feeling that I needed to see how are you." And so I told him the story of the DUI and how I'd lost it and dumped all the booze down the sink. And he said, "Oh, well," he didn't say I felt that, but he obviously had felt it because he called me out of the clear blue. I hadn't talked to him for years. And so then that was it. I didn't hear from him again. So it was an interesting experience. I know Jim and I are connected somehow, and he just felt the energy all the way from Phoenix to New York City when I lost it over that driving under the influence citation Randy got. The next log will be about continued more psychic experiences I had, and a couple other that were just quite personal. But these three that I outlined here are my three major ones, and I wanted to put them just in one vlog. So you'll get some more in the next one.